Okay, I thought I was live, but apparently I misclicked the button and didn't go live. So you missed the whole first part of the episode. Today we are joined by JC Hall and Flying Rich, of course. How are you guys doing?
Good, good. And JC probably overcommitted and is regretting it at this point because he said, "Oh, hey, yeah, I'll join you next week. How's Tuesday?" I'm like, "Tuesday's fine. Got you locked in." He's like, well, "I'm gonna be at an airport."
Yeah, you're flying
I
rich.
mean,
I'm
we could
flying
have already
JC.
rescheduled. Never ever feel bad about that, you know.
Yeah. I was like, "Oh, we probably should reschedule." He's probably wanting to be honorable. He committed and wants to live up to his commitment. So
Yeah, you never have to worry about that. So we're pretty laid back here. We are pretty.
so
You're in the airport. Interesting.
I am in the airport. You guys hear me all right? I
I
got
can
yeah,
hear you
yeah.
fine.
cool. I had to switch over to the phone from the laptop. I think the picture's better too. So
Yeah, the picture looks pretty good.
yeah,
So
for the airport.
we're we usually don't have much of an agenda, but JC wanted to talk about what's going on at the schools with the people protesting.
Yeah, let's go
um,
ahead and talk about that because that's interesting. I've been following that closely.
JC, you want to lead off on that, what you think's going on and your take on it?
Oh, my take. I mean, a couple observations. I'm shocked to find out how much conservatives love these communist universities because everybody's rushing to, oh, we got to lock everybody up and get these classes back going. Students need to get back to their classes. So I, I'm just I'm just sort of dumbfounded at suddenly how popular these communist brainwashing centers are among so-called conservatives. So, but I understand we're just conservatives are just emotional people, and this is how it goes. But I'm very happy, very excited, not bothered by it at all. I'm very excited that University and Harvard are disrupted. I hope these riots continue. I hope these communist centers of brainwashing are disrupted for I don't know, a good century. That would be nice. I mean, maybe it'll get completely out of hand if they just close down for good. So that's what I'm kind of that's my take on it. That's what I'm excited about.
So you're kind of
So,
So where are you
blackpilling
guys?
it.
Where are you
so I
guys?
take it you're not
Are
really a
you in
big
the
fan.
We Love Communist Universities camp?
No, no. I mean, I spent 2 years at college and you know actually 4 years to get my 2 year degree. And glad I'm out.
Yeah, it's
uh,
it, it's been pretty wacky just kind of watching it, and listening to conservatives suddenly use leftist talking points. I've been hearing conservatives say, uh, freedom of speech has limits. I mean, that used to be a phrase from the left. And then I would hear,
ooh,
when your expression of free speech uh, is violent, then there's a problem. Well, expression of free speech is not violent. So we're
right.
this commingling of free speech and violence. Like, so if they said, hey, we need to arrest trespassers. We need to arrest people who are engaged in
Hmm.
vandalism. But that's all of a sudden conservatives are talking about anti-Semitism and hate speech and these different beliefs and thoughts. It's just weird um, of this mingling all of a sudden. But honestly, that's what I've realized. In 14 years of doing this, um, conservatives are very, very easily manipulated. All you need is the right boogeyman, and they will start sounding just like the left. They're ready to shred the Constitution in order to defeat the opponents. So, being anti-left and being, you know, pro-Republican, uh, anti-liberal, anti-communist is not the same thing as being pro-liberty. And so, what I've realized with
Hmm.
conservatives, their main core belief is defeat the opponent. Defeat the opponent. They say it's, we support the Constitution, we believe in liberty, but actually their drive is simply defeat the opponent. And when the Constitution or liberty gets in the way, then they will happily set it aside. So that's
Yeah,
what I've.
I 100%
And then
agree with
and
you.
usually they can't understand when you're trying to explain these distinctions. They just can't hear it. They keep talking the same thing. Well, these guys are committing violence. Okay, then arrest them for committing violence. But if they're
Right.
trespassing, okay, arrest them for trespassing. So
Right.
then why are you expressing it in a way that says we need to stop this anti-Semitism? We need to da 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 da. And then the craziest thing is to hear the conservatives say, one lady told me they're interfering with our right to services. We need to be able to our kids need to be able to get back to class. I'm like, what does that even mean? So that's the strange thing of suddenly supporting. I mean, Columbia University is literally from 1935, the headquarters. It is the Pentagon, right? The Pentagon of neo-Marxism since
Hmm.
1935. And all of a sudden, we got to get it back going again. Just bizarro world.
Yeah, one thing that I always like to tell people: freedom of speech is not to protect popular speech; is to
Right.
protect unpopular speech, because there's no
Right.
need to protect popular speech.
Yeah.
Correct.
And the funny thing is, so I listened to one of the protesters, Columbia University, and she says, and I quote, "We are just living out what we have been taught here in our studies." Yeah,
Wow.
hello, that is Columbia University. So, 1935. Probably most of the people that watch your show are smart enough to know this, but have heard of the Frankfurt School.
Hmm.
The Frankfurt School
You're
was
giving my
basically
audience too much credit.
well, I'm trying to be diplomatic and nice because you start talking to conservatives and trying to distinguish these things and they get emotional and they stop listening. So, just to help folks out, the Frankfurt School uh, basically was a Marxist, neo-Marxist think tank for Marxist strategy and tactics in the 30s. And so, with the rise of Hitler and all that regime, a bunch of those folks fled, and the Frankfurt School essentially moved and set up their headquarters at Columbia University in 1935. And they have been the epicenter for Marxist infiltration of America for coming up on 90 years. So I find it very, very hard to get upset about bad things happening at Columbia University.
Yeah, Columbia is. I don't know. It's like the Ivy League schools. It's like whenever you get rich people, their kids always become communists for some reason. I don't
Yeah,
know.
well, and that's the other level of the scam, the problem here that you mentioned there, John, the Ivy League, right? So we're not just talking about Columbia University, but Harvard, this entire Ivy League system. You're talking about number one, each of these universities have multi-billion-dollar uh, what do they call it? Endowment funds.
Yep.
So Harvard University alone, as an example, has a $50 billion endowment fund. That means people graduate. They got these rich folks that graduated, their alumni. They give back, and so Harvard puts these donations into these endowments, which essentially, tax free. They're already tax free. That's another level of scam. But bottom line is, so $50 billion, and they Harvard budgets to get 8% on that yearly, and that's their operating budget. So you're talking, I think when I did the math, I think it's $4 billion a year tax-free and operating funds just from the endowments. Then they're a nonprofit, so they leverage their nonprofit status to make all these purchases of property and the different things that they do. So they pay zero taxes. They make $4 billion in interest on a $50 billion endowment fund every year, and they're also quasi public-private entities. So if you were, for instance, protesting out in a public space, in other words, a space that is supported by taxpayer dollars, which Harvard is supported by taxpayer dollars. So in a public space, you can protest as long as you don't, as long as you don't break the law, like violence and vandalism, et cetera, and that you don't block public walkways like sidewalks and streets. However, here's this public-private, whatever entity creation. Same thing they do with corporations, how they sidestep the Constitution and the law. So here's
Hmm.
this, what ought to be a public space, which is supported by public funds, but yet now they have these rules where you got to get out of here. We can kick you out of here, and you're trespassing. Like you couldn't do that in a public space like a public park. Yeah, I mean, parks permit as far as people that are going to be there at times or whatever, but they can't come in there in a public park and you have scheduled a protest and they say, oh, you got to leave because it's a public taxpayer funded space. Well, Harvard and Columbia are public taxpayer funded space, but then at the same time, they're also private. So this is one of the ways these public-private partnerships, corporate creations do this as well. Public-private partnerships are a way that these folks are able to sidestep the ordinary rule of law that would apply to the rest of us. So
isn't that amazing?
With these spaces.
Isn't that amazing?
Rich,
Oh, well, and that's what the government does as far as censorship with like tech companies that they've been doing in the past is, so they'll ask the tech company to do the censorship. The tech company says, well, yeah, we're exempt from any regulations and we can censor whoever we want.
Right. Because they're not a government entity, right? Yeah,
So
you're exactly right. So they created this in-between status, right? Because when you talk about constitutional restrictions, usually you're talking about those restrictions apply to government. They apply to public agencies, public agents, and things like that. So, and that's another thing I see. Golly, these goofy conservatives. I saw someone saying like there's a disagreement in the comments on Instagram, and some guy, because the second guy was contradicting the first guy and said he shouldn't say this or whatever. Then the next guy comes along, oh, you're violating his First Amendment right. Like all of a sudden, the disagreement on Instagram is a violation of the First Amendment. So people don't even understand what this is. So the First Amendment applies to the government censoring your speech. So they create these in-betweens where they classify themselves as a private entity, but in fact they're, as you said, either carrying out the mission of the government, like working on behalf of the government as an agent, or they're funded by public tax dollars. And so when you try to hold them accountable, they step over into the private realm and say that doesn't apply to us. And then when it's about money and funds and somehow restricting them financially, then they want to step into the public realm and grab the protections that would be had for government entities, the immunity and things like that. Just like we gave immunity to Pfizer and all this other stuff. And now, like Pfizer, just an example. This is another example of the public-private mingling, which I don't agree, by the way, with sovereignty concept anyway. But they give this immunity to this private corporation, and now we're finding out that all the things they were accused of, they're now admitting to in court documents in these lawsuits. Well, guess what? They're not going to pay the lawsuits. We are.
Right.
We're going to split the bill for everybody suing now Pfizer, and they can just freely admit, we did all these bad things. Yeah, this killed people. Yeah, this caused blood clot. They can now freely admit all of the wrongdoing, and it doesn't matter. You and I are going to pay the lawsuits because of this private public mingling within the law and within corporate classifications. So this is really one of the number one threats, I think. I think much of the conservative movement is still sort of behind or still sort of partially focused. I think for a long time, the threat has been the sort of corporate monster more than the government monster, and mainly this new creation of corporate.
Oh, dang. Dang. So, I mean, often we're talking about the U.S. government being a soft tyranny, and I think we're getting more and more of a harder tyranny. And JC's back. Let's see.
Because of what I was just explaining, I don't think it's an accurate statement that it's soft tyranny. What it is shifting tyranny. It's hard tyranny, but that sort of soft tyranny perspective is forced upon us because they have created the system to be able to hide behind private corporations and these sort of this new classification. So it appears like soft tyranny because it's not government, right? We would think hard tyranny, government coming directly at you. they don't need to come directly at you. They create a system where they can sidestep the traditional constitutional restraints.
So would you say it's a veiled hard tyranny, an outsourced hard tyranny? Where are we?
I like the term outsourced hard tyranny. I like that.
It's happy tyranny because
Yeah.
people don't. Oh, so I don't have to think for myself. I don't have to do this.
Yeah, that I think outsourcing
Easier that
really
way.
that really encapsulates when you say outsource. My background, I came from military intelligence. I worked at National Security Agency for a while, and I don't know how it's maybe within the last 10 years or so, maybe even more recently, I started to see the rise of private, what they call OSINT, open source intelligence um, agencies and projects and work. In other words, the things that I used to do for the Navy, for the National Security Agency, on behalf of the United States government, all these supposed functions, there are now hundreds and hundreds of private enterprise that are. It was basically guys like me who got out, went into private industry, and they started doing the things that they did for the government. And now the government taps into that and outsources, and then they can sort of throw their hands up and go, that we didn't do anything. That was this private company, and the same restrictions don't apply to this private company. So you look at spy cameras and all this stuff. You really research anything to do with the surveillance state, and probably I would say 8 times out of 10, it's not a government actor directly that is doing that is really heading up the surveillance. It's contractors, private entities that are doing it, and they're sort of selling. I mean, some of these arguments have been made in the Supreme Court by the government. We don't have to do this, we don't have to do that because it's a third party. And I think there was one opinion that said, okay, that's nonsense. It doesn't matter if it's third party. I think it was that they were putting trackers on cars, without a warrant and this sort of stuff, and they tried to use the third party thing. As a matter of fact, Michelle Bachmann even argued that this was okay back when they were looking at into your email, like the phone companies and telecom companies and these different third parties were getting your emails and giving them to the government. She actually argued that you don't have an expectation of privacy and nor the protections because it's not the government, it's a third party, and it doesn't.
Wow.
I might have actually helped design that program, but let's go.
So that's where we are. It's a cool show. I'm a sci-fi fan, so I don't know if you guys like sci-fi, but there's a show called Continuum. Did you ever see the show Continuum?
No.
Is that old?
It is old now. I think it came out of the Canadian studios. I forget what that channel is, but I think it's a Canadian show. Which they put out some good sci-fi. But it's called Continuum, and sort of the bad guy was what they called the corporate Congress. The corporate Congress, and I've been watching for like 10 years and thinking this is where we are. The corporate Congress, and it's just this total intermingling of what is supposed to be your representatives, but they actually work at the behest of massive corporations.
You mean real life?
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean it's a time travel show, but it's like real life.
Yeah, it's just like what of it? California, they passed a law of the raising minimum wages for restaurant workers, but they exempted restaurants that have a bakery. And you're like, what do you mean restaurants have a bakery? And then you come to find out that Panera is like the biggest donor of the bill's sponsor.
Yeah. Anytime you see an exemption, you always know there's a lobbyist behind that. And,
yes.
Basically, it's follow the money. There's a lobbyist behind that, and you look at what corporation is this going to benefit. You kind of saw this during COVID lockdowns and that sort of thing. You look at basically you saw mom and pop had to close their doors, and these big box stores, big corporate entities they could do whatever they wanted.
That was crazy.
But mom and pop had to shut down. Which is basically, this is another thing that goes over the head of miseducated folks. It's quintessential Marxism, because Marxism was founded and has always been led by the uber wealthy. Marx was a rich guy, rich kid.
Yep.
Engels was a rich kid. The founder of the Frankfurt School in Germany was a rich kid. They were all sons of wealthy industrialists, used daddy's money, and ran the communist game. So it's always some big uber wealthy, big money entity behind all of these things, because Marxism really was a neo-Marxism, Gramscian Marxism, or what people call cultural Marxism today, is primarily what we're looking at.
I dated a communist.
It's always been about the consolidation of wealth, not redistribution of wealth, consolidation of wealth into the hands of a small handful of uber elite, wealthy individuals, so that they can control the rest of humanity. So that's what you always see, and that's why people are fooled a lot of times. They see these billionaires, how can Zuckerberg be a neo-Marxist commune? How can Bill Gates and name all these rich guys? Marxism has always been led by the uber wealthy. That's what it's all about: consolidation of power and wealth into their hands, because they see themselves as demigods over the rest of us. And so, it's always, and then our representatives that we elect, it's the only reason they go into Congress, most of them, is to climb into that realm, because they want to be one of those folks. So you see Nancy Pelosi, and some of these big deep state Republicans trading thousands and thousands. Remember, one Republican guy had traded, I don't know what it was, something like tens of thousands of stock trades. Like, he's a representative, and tens of thousands of stock trades in a short period. He was literally like more active than day traders on the floor of Wall Street. And he's making all these trades based on insider information. So you go in there and accumulate millions and millions and millions using insider information.
So
they can climb into that elite group.
So the date or
Okay,
Congress can.
One second.
All right.
I just want to. This is very important that people understand, is that Congress is exempt from insider trading laws. So
except they have to report it.
They have to report it, but they say, I'm going to use insider trading to get this, but they're still allowed to do it, and they're still allowed to profit from insider information. They just have to tell, I used insider information for this.
Yeah, and that's very recent, by the way.
Yeah, that's very recent. But here's the thing.
What they have to, the level that they have to report is very recent. And what we found out since that law was passed is that they don't care.
Well,
they don't care.
The reason why, this is what I'm getting to. Do you know what the penalty for them not reporting it is?
Nothing.
There's no penalty. There's no penalty attached to it.
Yeah.
It specifically calls, there's no penalty. We passed the law, but there's no penalty for if you break it. So there's no force, there's no teeth. So it was for show. That's all it was.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, first, because it's bipartisan, right? The corruption is bipartisan, and they're just so brazen. They really don't care. Heads on sticks. Yeah, this is why. That's funny. I'm watching the Trump thing, and I just told my wife we were driving to the airport, and a topic came up about some of the trial or something, and I told her, I said, yeah, I'm praying every night they throw Trump in jail, because let's just go ahead and get this thing started.
Kick it off.
Lock him up, right? Because now they're
right.
thrown in jail because of what he said. I'm like, please do it, because a lot of folks need some motivation. Let's just go ahead and solve this problem, and I think that would really kick stuff off very nicely.
JC, you kind of sound shot out of the cannon, black-pilled today.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to.
That's all right. It's interesting. That's
okay.
let me
ask you something. What do you think of the Convention of States?
Are
you for Convention of States or against it?
I'm neither. it's irrelevant to me because I just don't think it's. I mean, when you say convention of states, what you're talking about is the fifth article to the Constitution. So,
Yeah,
it's a legitimate process of changing the Constitution. But um, the problem with that, with that process within the Constitution is it takes a very long time, right? Because the states are in control as far as the states have to finally vote and all of them have to ratify and all this kind of stuff. So you're talking long process. I mean, they've been trying to get everybody to agree in all these states for many years already, much less getting it kind of started. So I don't really have a position per se because I just don't think it's almost not even worth talking about from my point of view because it's not going to do anything. First off, it's not going to happen. I don't think it's ever going to happen.
no.
If it does happen in our lifetime, I just don't. I don't see anything coming out of it.
The reason why I asked that is because Rich and I were supposed to have a debate on because I'm like, yeah, it's stupid. And Rich was like, I'm for it. So we set this debate up on one of our other podcasts that we do on Wednesdays now called Uncensored. And I gave my little spiel of why I don't believe in it. And Rich goes, I see your point. I agree with you now. And that was the end of the debate.
Well, that's the thing about that debate. There's points on either side. I'm not against it. I just don't. I don't have any hope in it because of understanding the nature of the process. You're talking. I mean, well, we need something now. Like we don't have time. We don't have a decade to try to figure that out and get it off the ground. I just don't think I don't think it ever would happen, no matter what you do.
And you're, you know what, that's I think a more enlightened, because there's people that are very, pro convention of states, people that are very against it. Now, I don't know if this is your opinion. I think
it's a nasty debate. Both sides of that argument are just, they get so nasty. It's just ridiculous to me.
But I think JC, your wife says she's more in favor of states not obeying a federal law.
Yeah, she's not opposed. She doesn't take an oppositional stance to an Article 5 convention. I mean, that would be opposing the Constitution, right? So it is a legitimate process within our Constitution. It is the fifth article of the Constitution is what we're talking about. Now, some people describe it in certain ways as to excise, any congressional role from the process, which is not constitutional. But that aside, her position is similar to mine in the sense of, she says this is a long-term fix. It's when you want to deal with structural issues within the Constitution, but nullification and basically non-compliance is a right now matter because we're in a right now time. We don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think we have a decade. We just don't have a decade. I believe we have one more election, and then there is. I mean, we're already hard pressed to find very many remnants of our constitutional system. So after this election, I don't think you can find remnants of the constitutional system with a search warrant. It's going to be crazy. So at that point, what is even the point of convention of states? You're talking about rebuilding. First off, you're gonna have to fight for it, and then rebuild the republic from the ground up. So, and then one of the thoughts is this: we're talking about a government not following the Constitution. So now we're going to add an amendment to the Constitution that they don't follow to make them follow.
Right.
So even philosophically, I have a little bit of trouble with it. Not that I'm opposed to the process of doing it, but my view is, okay, that's fine. We can add some things and change some things, but you're still going to need some enforcement army. You're still going to need something outside of that to make it work because it's not working now. And so that's where I think, like our view is the nullification aspect of the elements locally and state that have to participate in resisting encroachment.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a band of random people saying no, but it's it's a whole system of we need our sheriffs to engage, we need our county commissions to
Right.
engage, we need those state legislators to engage, because we don't want to be the one guy standing on the porch by ourselves saying no. That just sends you to jail. So that's not the message. People a lot of times hear non-compliance and how's that going to work, Chris? And they have the guns and whatever. Well, that no, you need your public officials on the state and local level to be with you, to be a shield for you. That's the message. I mean, obviously there is that moment at an individual level that you have, that you would do that and have to do that. But you also have to count the cost. It doesn't mean it doesn't come with a price. Could you end up in jail for doing this? Yeah, you could. Could you end up losing stuff? So that's the one part Chris talks about, the organizing element of it. We really have to organize and do that in an organized fashion and a sort of collective fashion. Like, I think some people have the thought process of that, like January 6th, but then they miss the sort of system element of it. We're not talking about a crowd of people just showing up, and that's something entirely different. And I think that's why some of that didn't go well and opened the door for instigators and subversives to get in there and manipulate that process.
A lot of
So
FBI agents were
a
there.
whole systemic process to that.
A lot of undercover feds were there.
Exactly. And that's why you have to organize appropriately and build your system to stand and resist.
Is Governor Abbott doing nullification with Texas, or is that, or what is?
Well, in practice, in a sense, yes. Now his motivations is another conversation, because he's a total globalist, wuss who actually spoke out. Chris Ann talked to him over a decade ago, face to face, and he basically poo-pooed the entire concept. But what he's doing now, 10 years ago, he said is not the authority of the states to do. So all of this is out of convenience, it's optics, which is fine.
Yes.
Like Jesus said, if they're not against us, then leave them alone. They're for us, whatever. So if he's doing the right thing, good for him. But it's not because he actually believes in the principles.
And good point. Thanks for mentioning that, because I think it's like, hey, he's up for election. He's got to do, he's got to rally the troops behind him.
Well, it's also low-hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you see with a lot of these Republicans and conservatives. You see somebody run out there and talk tough, and I'll stand for a second. Duh, that's like minimum conservative. It's not a bragging point,
right?
So they always their bona fides are always this sort of low-hanging fruit that, hey, bro, well, we kind of expected, that to be the minimum. But then when it's sort of put your neck on the line and stand for the serious things, they're nowhere to be found, or they fold. So I think in this instance, like, oh, okay, cool, bro. It took a multi-million person invasion to get you to stand. That's great. Wow, very very brave of you. Very risky of you. Whenever basically everybody in the nation is clamoring for this, you say, right, okay, I'm going to be on the right side. So yeah, give me a break. But like I said, do the right thing. I don't care what the reason is. Just get it done. That's fine. But the problem is, it's just like us here in Florida. Our conservative voters here in Florida is very similar in Texas. Some of the dumbest voters in the country. So they'll see this and go, "Oh yeah, Governor Abbott, look what he did."
Right.
They'll
right.
Like this idiot over and over again. I mean, come on, Dan Crenshaw. Hello. That's all we have to say. Texas, looking at you, Texas. But same thing in Florida. We fall for the same kind of nonsense. So we have terrible voters. Terrible.
Yeah, I've got a Congress critter, Brian Mast, my congressman, and he's against semi-automatic firearms.
Yeah. No, the red state, most of our red state voters they're very prone to sort of nationalistic propaganda and memes and sort of tough guy talk and all this sort of stuff. So and I'm a veteran, but it's funny. I'm a preacher and I'm a veteran, and those are like two red flags for me when a politician when the politician is waving those flags. It's a red flag for me. I automatically begin to question you more if you're running on your veteran status and your Christian credentials. I'm like, okay,
Right,
why is he trying
right.
to flex? What is he trying to hide? I don't trust this guy anymore, right? Um, so yeah, we elect people like that because most, I would say a large majority of them, on the red side are just very programmed. Wrap it in the flag, put a badge on it, we'll salute it, and we'll agree with whatever. Roll out a bad guy, with an Arabic accent, or some leftist doing bad things, and we'll follow some tough guy, all of a sudden barking. Um, so that's how these rhinos get in there. That's how these deep state cats get in there, because they get all this low hanging fruit, this sort of standard conservative talking points. So we lap it up as voters. So we have to do better. We have to be better, more discerning in our choices. So there's no way, no way Abbott should have been reelected this last year. There were at least 3-4 better alternatives in the primary. And I think they elected this jackass over 75% support. So I mean, just crazy, man.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So
And we're seeing that there's
my hope's not in conservatives or Republicans or any people like that. If your hope is in the voting electorate, um, and it's easy. By the way, easy scapegoat to say, oh, it's rigged, the voting machines and voter fraud. Like we got a worse problem with idiot voters more than we have with voter fraud. Yeah, there's voter fraud, but there's a lot more moronic, uninformed conservative voters than there are fake votes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So one of the comments here, Abbott is supporting a rhino congressman against a true conservative.
Of course, that's who he is. That's who he is. He's a total deep state globalist rhino. He's your run of the mill, what I'll call four-plank conservatism. He's a neocon, basically. To those who know.
Yeah, neocons are.
He's a neocon. And so, honestly, as I said, most of the so-called conservative electorate, they don't understand the distinctions. They hear the tough guy stuff on your basic, things that ought to be basic. And these guys make a big thing out of that. And the nuances of actually standing for constitutional liberty, they don't. These politicians, they don't get it. Either they don't understand it, or they're literally opposed to it, which is really a guy like Abbott. He's anti-constitutional, right? When you talk about the real things that matter, he's for a lot of the basic things that any conservative should be for. But then he's against things that people think that they don't pay attention to. And anytime he's on the right side, he's just doing it for optics. He's just doing it for political reasons. And that's how a lot of these guys are. Nick Van Winkle, he's always, you listen to him. If all you knew from him was just these meme videos that he puts out, and you're like, yeah, this guy, this patriotic guy, tough guy, he's a total stooge, man, total idiot, anti-constitutional, globalist, deep state, rhino moron. But that's what we follow. Oh, Navy SEAL, Navy SEAL. Who cares? I don't care. What does that have to do with anything? And so,
He's got great commercials. What was it last year? Yeah.
Yeah, because they all get the deep state has deep coffers. They got because really that's a lot of what it's all about. It's the same thing on the left. We say on the left that we act like it's two different sides. It's not two different sides. So the deep state is left and right, and it's all controlled by corporate interests. So they have the big money. They have the deep pockets. So they're going to have the best campaign. They're going to know all the little buttons to push, all the rah things to say, and everybody just eats up. And so we just, again, I hate to be that guy, but just such an ignorant electorate on our side that doesn't do the homework, that doesn't pay attention to details, and just fall for campaigning and fall for memes and videos and whatnot. I used to love what Justin Amar would do. Now I didn't agree with every position of Justin Amar, but every time he voted, man, he would get on a live stream and would explain his vote in detail and explain the
Mm-hmm.
bill,
Mm-hmm.
explain what was going on. I mean, every time it kept people informed. And a couple others do that. And AOC does that. AOC, the one thing, it's funny AOC, because I listen to her and Matt and how Matt Gaetz and she and Matt Gaetz talk about each other. And it's interesting that she's obviously progressive, radical, and all that kind of stuff. But the one thing she's not is she's not corrupt. She's not bought and paid for. She's a true believer.
AOC?
Correct. No.
Really?
If you listen to her, you can't see. This is the thing. We look conservative memes and all this stuff. No,
Mm-hmm.
go listen
Mm-hmm.
to her.
Oh yeah,
Go
yeah.
her
I'm a victim.
listen to her, and yeah, she's a true believer. Yes, she's a nut. As far as the belief, we don't agree with anything. But she's sincere. She's sincere, right?
Wow.
We don't agree with her, but she's sincere. That's different. And this is what I'm trying to point out. We will be against her because of what she believes and eat up all the means and talk about whatever. But then the Republicans, right, who just who are not sincere, then we fall for that. So it's just crazy. It's crazy. We have to be more discerning.
By the way, guys, I am putting out something out there right now. Fattack.com is now doing the official John Crump merchandise.
Oh, cool.
And
Nice.
I am listing it there. So go buy your official. There are some designs up now and more to be coming shortly.
So, JC, I know you weren't going to be able to do the full show today. How much more time do you have?
I think I'm good for. I'm probably good until 6.
Oh, okay. All right.
That works for me.
Supposedly we start boarding at 6:20, so I think
You
got me saying all these things that that don't win you friends. It's how you lose all your conservative friends.
Well, it's the truth, and I think you should never be afraid to speak the truth.
No, I'm not. I don't need that many friends.
If you lose friends because of the truth, so be it.
I hate when people say, "Oh, that's your truth and my truth is this." No, there's no your truth. There's no my truth. There's only the truth, and that's
correct. It. Yep.
So
yeah, and I think the very notion. This is one thing that I see is very troubling in our digital media world that we live in today, social media. Things like this, everybody can get a podcast and say whatever. You have this dissemination of anything and everything. It's like the very notion of truth is under attack. That it's gone to such an extreme now that the position I think is dangerous, and even within our on our side, on both sides, is that truth can't be known. That's what I see a lot of. So that now everything is in question. Nothing's accepted. You hear people fighting back and forth about flat Earth, round Earth, and landing on the moon, not landing on the moon. And I'm not talking about whatever position you're at on that, because obviously there's some plenty of good arguments. But just things that within that realm, all of a sudden, because there's been one deception, and because there's been this deception, now all of a sudden that blankets everything, and where now people say you never can know the truth, right? That truth can't be known. I think that's a very, very dangerous place that we are right now because of the So you would say, let's say. Okay, the moon landing was a deception. Okay, let's accept that that's a deception. So then people take the fact that was a deception, and now you can't believe in it. That's a very dangerous leap to make. That because of one deception, now everything is a deception.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So early on in my political life, and I've been exposed to politics since I was a young kid because of my parents. I used to think it was, Democrat ideas like liberal versus conservative. And as I got older, I'm like, it's kind of like good versus bad. And now I'm like, no, this is like spiritual warfare. It's godly versus the devil, demonic stuff. Where do you see it?
Yeah, I, I agree. Um, but I also say this, from the natural, what you referred to first part, the good guy, bad guy. But one part I realized in that, from a historical perspective, I've now gotten to the point where I realize that there is no good guy. So when you hear the narrative, this happened, and you'll hear, we did it for these good reasons and that good reason. Think of war, for instance, of different wars we went into. And the more you study almost every one of the wars or anything that we're supposed to support, you realize there was some nefarious entity behind it or some nefarious motivation that maybe the individuals that participated, maybe they did some good, right? And maybe some good things happened. But then you realize that the overall motivation and manipulations behind it were not, and so then you're left with what you end up with is a bad guy and a badder guy. And so it begins to be very difficult to find good guys in many of these historical events that we've been taught. So that's on that side as far as historically, it's in the realm of
So we're talking about the
material.
lesser of two evils for the most part, then.
Yeah, which is still evil, right? So, and again, that's where the door of so-called conspiracy opens up. You realize, there's some vast conspiracy by a lot of bad individuals with similar philosophies and motivations. They may not all be working together, but they all share a similar philosophy, so they're all moving in the same direction. Many of them are working together, but many even are not. They're just moving in the same direction because they believe the same things. But as far as spiritual side, yeah, obviously, it's good versus evil. But I'm always very careful and sort of advise people to be careful not to make what shall I say false separation, right? A lot of times, what I notice in the church world, in the faith world, people make stark distinctions between spiritual, material, and natural. The fact is, you can't separate the two, right? So you can over spiritualize things to such an extent where you're ignoring the physical realities and not doing what you need to do in the physical. Again, you get to, oh well, Jesus is going to take care of this, he's going to take care of this. And you get these do nothings because, well, this is spiritual power. We can't do this. This has to be just one in prayer. And so, okay, so everybody goes and kneels down on the tarmac in prayer, and they come and run you over the bulldozer. Okay, so there's some physical things that have to happen as well. So certainly spiritual battle, but that doesn't negate physical things that we need to get done. We live in a real world. We live in a body. And here's another thing: everything that is spiritual is done through a material vessel.
Yeah.
Right? So even though it's a spiritual battle, there are people that these things have to work through to accomplish their purposes. It's not just some spontaneous materialization of all these things. Somebody did it. There's a name to it. Just as a not real example, but sort of a similar thought process. I used to get so irritated at these reports that say, the court, issued opinion today, or the court did this, or law enforcement did this. These sort of government entity phrases, and nobody ever puts a name to it. Like, who was the judge? Who was this person? There's a person behind this.
Right.
And, so many of that goes unreported. And so I think the same thing. Sometimes people so super spiritualize that becomes a sort of shield for the guilty party that's actually being used to do this. If that makes sense.
So, We covered a couple of things. I want to ask you one last question as we reach the end of the show here. You did a lot of work, Russian linguistics work, intelligence work. Where do you see Ukraine and Russia right now?
Well, they've been at war for 1,500 years. That's all they know. That's who they are. They hate each other.
Hmm.
They always have, and they always will. Um, none of the governments are good guys. None of the government representatives are good guys. Putin's not a good guy. Zelensky's not a good guy. Um, Now, what you have, just like with any governmental realm, is you have the innocent people on the ground are the ones
Hmm.
that are suffering. Yet, but we're pushed into this debate about you either support Putin or you support Zelensky. I support neither because neither of them
Hmm.
are good guys. Um, Now, that's not a comment about the nature of the conflict. Um, that's a different issue. And so, I think regardless of what who you see doing what, we should all be in favor of innocent people not dying and not suffering. And
Hmm.
therefore, we should be, I think our focus needs to be on how do we stop that. And
Hmm.
that's the sad part, that our governments are not interested in stopping it. They're interested in making money off of it. In fact, I
Right.
heard a Republican representative say, we need to support our friends in Ukraine. So we need to give them weapons. And she said this: we can give them our old weapons. And I thought, old weapons? Wait a minute. If you're really interested in, as you say, defeating the aggressor, why are you saying give them old weapons? So that told me right there. That was a signal right there. They're not interested, as they say. Like the talking point is defeat Putin, blah blah blah. But then when you hear that, you realize their interest is to perpetuate, to have this conflict go as long as it can go, so they can make as much money as they can off it. In fact, what's the guy? What's the old codger in the Senate from Kentucky, Republican? Um, he talked. He was what is his name? He like froze at the podium a couple
Oh,
of times.
Mitch McConnell.
McConnell.
Mitch
Yeah.
McConnell. So
The
Mitch
turtle.
McConnell. Yeah, you heard him talking about the conflict. About he thinks it's good because it's revitalizing the defense industry and the weapons manufacturing. We're revitalizing that industry. So he's saying, all these people dying over there on that continent,
Hmm.
it's a good thing because it's helping our industry. I mean, these are how sick these people are. So when you hear all this virtue signaling about who's on
Right.
what side, we support this side, we support that side, that's all nonsense. They're not concerned uh, with either side. It's not about them. They don't even. I don't think they don't even hate Putin like they say they do. Because if they didn't have Putin there as the bad guy, then how could they perpetuate their excuse to
Right.
continue with this,
Right.
continue their revolution? So it's basically blood money, and
Hmm.
we got to stop being forced into their narrative, of choosing a side. That's how they get us. That's how they hide behind it. So, choose between which one of these two is a bad guy. Guess what? It's the third guy behind the curtain that's the bad guy. That's the real bad guy in this
It's a guy you don't
scenario.
see.
That's those folks that are wringing money out of debt.
The
And so
robber barons.
it's really very sad because I know we know people from Russia, we know people from the Ukraine. We've been in conversations and had contacts. With people working in there. I mean, I know a man who was a celebrity. He was a musician in the Ukraine. Just started this mission to rescue kids out of a particular area, and has rescued about 200,000 children out of this. Because some people say, a lot of this stuff that happened there is covered for a lot of human trafficking and this kind of stuff. So he's literally getting children out of harm's way, for what's happening. Either, again, whatever side you're on, either Russian forces are moving in and killing all the people there, and he's rescuing them, or is cover for some other nefarious individuals who want to round up all these kids and do something with them. And so he's pulling on. These are Ukrainians, so they're good guys as far as people on the ground. On either side, innocent people suffering. And I think either government cares much about the people, they care about reaching themselves. And there's people really over here, people in the West, that want to make sure it keeps going. I mean, heck, man, you look at we're talking about insider trade. You look at some of the trades that happened connected to the defense industry that came out of Congress. That'll tell you all you need to know.
Mm-hmm. So, how do you think the conflict with Russia and Ukraine end?
I don't.
That's what I'm worried about.
What does that even mean? What does it mean? They've been fighting for 1,500 years. So, I mean, we could ask a similar question: when did this conflict begin?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you answer that? I can tell you, it's been going on for 1,500 years. So, if it's lasted that long, why do we have some illusion that it's going to end, whatever that means? So, I think the questions would have to be more specific. Do you think Ukraine is going to get that land back? I don't know. Do you think Russia's going to move back beyond the lines that it was at to the east of Donbass? I don't know. I don't believe it is Russia's intent to leave that land, particularly in the Donbass region. And if you know anything about the history in the industrial importance and the metal, water, the different things that are in the Donbass region, you'd be a little more informed about what's happening.
Yeah, you have a lot of wheat there.
Yeah, so I don't. Yeah, and that's the other area as far as it's like 70% of the world's wheat production right in there. Mm-hmm. So I don't think they have any intention of moving back. So I think it's going to be a long mess for a very long time. Now, I think if these Western powers, if their beliefs actually match their words, I think they could push Russian forces out there within a week, no problem. But they're not interested in it. And that's the sad part, that so many Ukrainians think that these people in Congress and these people running their mouth are their friends. They're not. They're not. They don't care about you any more than BLM cared about Black lives, any more than Antifa was concerned about fascism. So this is all cover. This is all propaganda. These are all opportunities for these warmongers and death dealers to enrich themselves. And so I don't see this ending very quickly. You remember, what's his name? The complete incompetent, moronic buffoon, General Milley, announced, almost a year plus ago, the war is over, Putin's lost. So these guys are, one part of them are complete buffoons, and the other part of them are complete liars. So I think we're in for a very long haul. Now, I could see if Trump got in, he would begin to move in a different direction. I think they would start trying to have some talks. But then you're going to be stuck with, what is somebody going to give up? What are they going to negotiate? So that's going to. So I think that'll probably start to happen, but that's going to be fraught with turmoil as well. But at least it might give an opportunity to sort of stop the bloodshed. And then you can begin to deal with the other things in a different manner with a different approach. Because I think Trump is essentially anti-war. Trump is really not in the warmongering class. And you see how he reacted to the Iran thing back when John Bolton was in there. I think they gave good indication that at his core, he's not in favor of these kind of things, because I think he really is a compassionate person that loves people at his heart. The trouble is, can he be manipulated like the rest of them take over the agenda? That's the big question. But I do think we have a completely different approach. Biden is just going to talk and cover for the military-industrial complex to keep.
Well, we have 1 minute before my premiere of my video, my other channel happens.
All
So
right, man.
we're gonna have to.
Appreciate y'all
Thank you for coming on so much. Anything you want to plug before we let you go?
Hey, follow me on Instagram, JC Hall Global, at JC Hall Global Instagram.
Yeah, definitely give them a follow. A lot of interesting posts over there. Thank you so much, PC. We'll be back tomorrow with Josiah
From PSA.
Appreciate you guys.
and we'll
Thanks.
see you guys later.
Have a good flight. Safe flight to you.
Yes, sir. Take it easy.